on any of your podcast channels, just put in Bridges Live, Dr. Paul Dyer, you be the judge with Marylin Pierre. So we're all out there on all the social medias, but mainly when we come into You Be the Judge, it is to talk about legal issues, and I have my top-notch attorney here, Marylin Pierre. But since then, we have joined another partner of ours, who's Judge Claudia Barber. She's going to be a regular. She gets her check in the mail next year about coming on the show. But thank you, everyone, for joining us. So You Be the Judge. Marylin, you want to take over and just introduce people? And Evie, where did Evie go?
Well, I guess she'll be there. She
Yes,
is.
I'm here. Thank you.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us. I am so excited. Dr. Dyer wanted to do a show today on women attorneys in honor of I keep saying that, in honor of Women's History Month. So this is really nice. We get an opportunity to talk about ourselves and why we got into law and what keeps us in the profession and our some of the things that we like about being in the profession and some of the things that we would like to improve. So, Evie, you were saying that you can't stay with us for the whole show. So, would you like to introduce yourself and then tell us a little bit about yourself? Oh, there you are. There you are. Did you hear what I said, Evie?
Yes, I did.
Okay, great.
I'm sorry, I'm having some technical difficulties.
Oh, well,
That's
that's
not
okay.
that-
While you work that out, we could go to Judge Barber.
And that's not good for us civilians to hear that a lawyer has technical difficulties. Is that why we stay in jail? I mean, this is why we can't get out because of briefs being technical. But Judge Barber, let's go to you and about being a judge, being an attorney. If you want, when did you start? Why did you start going to law school? Why law? And knowing that you were up against being a black woman to get into law had to been surmountable.
Well, one of the beautiful things in life is that many times you have opportunities, and when opportunities open up for you, you have options to seize the opportunity, take the opportunity, accept the opportunity. I did that. I was blessed to receive a full scholarship to law school. And the law school that I attended at that time was University of Baltimore School of Law. I received senatorial scholarships from former Senator Paula Hollinger and a former House of Delegate Ted Levin. They blessed me with both state senatorial and delegate scholarships. And I also received some minority grants that fulfilled the entire tuition for me. So it's just a matter of showing up and completing the curriculum and graduating, which I said yes, yes, and yes to all of that. So I had a passion for law school because, life experiences tend to point you sometimes in a direction where you have a craving or a yearning or a desire to correct injustices. So, I became aware that employment discrimination exists. The other interesting factor that came up is that the laws are not always sufficient enough to carry the day. And I also realized after I practiced law that serving as a judge does give you the opportunity to impact laws and decide and interpret decisions. It's not all that much power because if you want to follow established precedent, you have rules, you have regulations, you have prior case law to navigate and adjudicate decisions. But to the extent that there's a case of first impression, to the extent that someone is breaking new law. To the extent that you see there are some ambiguities in the law, you as the judge can weigh in on that in a way that can be masterfully done. And if it's upheld on appeal, it can be affirmed on appeal and again, establish good precedent as opposed to bad precedent. After all, that's how you got Plessy versus Ferguson reversed in Brown versus Board of Education. And then there are cases that follow that. Then you have, after Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was passed, you have Griggs versus Duke Power, McDonnell Douglas, all of those cases creating new laws and establishing precedent. So it's really important that women, and particularly minorities, pay attention to and do all they can to make a difference and impact laws, policies, regulations, etc. If it's a bad regulation, as a judge, you should explain why it doesn't work. It's broken. The system is broken.
So is it a fact? Was it something like when it like many things call to us for injustice or for service? Not everyone has that service in mind. They don't mind doing something for other people, but to literally change the fabric of what life dictates, that's a whole other service. I mean, it is so surmountable compared to, and this is not to take away from anyone who builds homes, right? Mm-hmm. But this is different. This is really completely different. Now, if you're a home builder and you see people who get beaten out of homes because they were built bad, and you go into a whole other realm, like what's a person who checks homes? Like an inspector and a home inspector, but he really does inspect instead of getting paid under the table and actually fix it, says this was wrong, go after your contractor, this was not done right. For a person to stand up and say, this is wrong, that takes a lot of courage, because as a Black woman or as a woman or even in law, you get killed.
Well, that is a concern, because many times we see in history the cards are stacked against us. And I also, when I ran for judge in 2016, I had concerns that I could be killed. Someone could take a contract out and kill me because I was trying to unseat judges who were going after 15-year terms, and I was impacting, their career. Mm-hmm. But to the extent that there were 5 open seats, and I was simply seeking one, there should not have been that type of, pushback or upheaval, but there was upheaval, there was controversy. Yes, there was controversy. And there was this sense of entitlement. That they're entitled to these positions and nobody should be coming up against them, that type of thing, and that's not an unusual situation to find yourself in, but you have to understand, my work with the NAACP and the Caucus of African American Leaders has been very eye-opening. I mean, when you hear complaints after complaints after complaints, you really get a feel, but there's an uneven application of the law. You get a sense that, and that's real, because real people will tell you situations that they have been in that are uncalled for, and that there needs to be some type of change to the system, to a dysfunctional system that doesn't work for everybody. Now, see, if this system worked for everybody, we wouldn't need this show.
Right.
But right. See, the system does not work for everybody. And that's the reason why we're bringing these issues to the forefront.
Yeah.
Even if you just, yes.
Well, that is so very, very important, and we do need to discuss that. I do want to give Liz a chance, though, to talk about how she got into law and what keeps her in law. And then we'll circle back again and have some conversation among all of us.
Thank you, Marylin. Well, I came into law sort of accidental. My best friend, she wanted to be a lawyer, so she said I should be a lawyer. I should go to law school. Like, what's law school? I really didn't know back then. I thought I was going to do something else. But I ended up really enjoying it. I used to do civil defense litigation, primarily for big firms like Venable. But then when I had children, I took time off to raise my children. But I learned the hard way. I learned everything the hard way, that once you get off the ladder, it's hard to get back on if you're a woman, especially if you get older. And it's, like I said, it's harder. But then I worked with my ex-husband for a while. He's a judge in Montgomery County. And when he was appointed to the circuit court, I thought, okay, I'll go back into civil practice. Easier said than done, again, because I was the judge's wife and I was precluded from getting any job whatsoever. So, even with the county attorney's office, they said I was not qualified because of the potential conflict of interest. And
wow.
Yeah. Okay, Liz.
It was amazing, but I ended up getting a job with the Court of Special Appeals as a staff attorney, like the court above me, and that lasted for a few years until I was, that was told the job ended and they wouldn't tell me why or what I should do. But
Liz, I don't want to interrupt you, but I do. I want to go into the weeds of your voice of saying, because I was a woman. What did you think, and then what did you figure out, and what did you find out that was fact?
You mean as a lawyer or as a woman?
Getting back in and not being so easy because you're a woman. I mean, it's literally these closed doors. Like we can only admit you if you look, sound, or is this way. It happens for all of you women, and it happens to women in certain. I mean, so it has happened to you, is happening to you.
Well, it's
before you, sorry, Liz, before you answer that question, I'm thinking that because some of us don't know what Venable is, I think you need to explain that because Venable is where I think so many attorneys aspire to be, and you gave that up for motherhood, and then that happened. So if you could explain that, what Venable is and why it has such an excellent reputation in the legal profession.
Oh, right. Well, it used to be Venable, Baker and Howard, and it was one of the top 10 law firms in the state of Maryland, and it was very well regarded and well respected by other attorneys. And I really enjoyed the time doing it, but I didn't realize taking time off would be that hard. But I was, and that's another thing. I was a civil defense litigation attorney, and I would always win my case on motion to dismiss or motion for summary judgment. So I never went to jury trial. So then later, people will ask me, well, how many jury trials have you had? And I'm like, well, none, because I got them dismissed. So I should have lost more because then I would have had jury trial experience to brag about. But because I was one, it didn't work out the way it should have. But then, ironically, when I tried going back to work, when I left the court, I again tried to go back into civil defense litigation or civil litigation in general. But I found there was a very clear bias against hiring women who were straight out, or candidates in general who were straight out of law school. There's a very clear bias. We want people who recent graduates. They don't want someone who's skilled and experienced and who's been.
Why is that?
Yeah, why is that? You would think they would.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, you don't have to worry that I'm going to go on maternity leave. I've done that, been there, done. My kids are grown and moved away. I don't know. And I think part of it is being a woman, because somehow I feel that if I were a man, it would be, I would be looked upon with some sort of like a prominent person. That's how I feel. I mean, maybe it's true, maybe it's not true, but something, it just feels, because I've talked to a lot of women who've been in a similar situation where you get, you get off the ladder, and it's like, well, okay, well, so much for you, you're.
Was there a way you could complain to who? And it's obviously you're going to end up complaining to another male about a male about it, and they're like, "Yeah, okay, you're complaining."
Well, when my position ended with the Court of Special Appeals, for example, I'd been there for 7 years as a full-time staff attorney. I moved to Annapolis to be closer to my job, and I with every opinion I submitted, I said, to the judge, please let me know, because I was doing everything that a Court of Special Appeals judge does. I had my own docket, my own, cases, and they were mostly cases submitted on brief. So I learned, I learned about being an appellate judge. And I would always say, if there's anything I can explain or anything wrong, please let me know. And there never seemed to be any problems. But because I was a contractual employee, there was nothing I could do. It was legally, I didn't realize this until I was out, that, I wasn't even a state employee. So even after 7 years, I wasn't considered a state employee. I was just, I could be just.
Well, that's a disadvantage,
Yeah.
and in my opinion, a failure of the system, because the legislature should close that loophole. If there is no avenue for someone to complain and grieve at issue, then that's a glaring loophole that needs to be corrected. And I just want to briefly add that as a member of the National Association of Women Judges, what Elizabeth just articulated about her experience with a law firm similar, the law firm of Venable. We had the pleasure of inviting former Supreme Court Justice Sandra Day O'Connor, and also Judge Gladys Kessler, who's one of the founding members of the National Association of Women Judges. And when they explained their avenue to trying to obtain a job in a law firm, the doors were not open. They, somebody had to break them open. In the case of Judge Gladys Kessler, she acknowledges to everyone in the body that when she applied for law firm positions, if you were considered of childbearing years, you would not get a job at a law firm, period. And she was very clear about that. And she graduated from Harvard University. She was very clear about that. And she had to go another route and get a job working in the government, maybe National Labor Relations Board or that Department of Labor, but she could not get a job. She was invited for an interview, but at the interview, the male attorney that interviewed her said, "I can't convince these people to hire you." And that's a reality. I mean, I'm saying exactly what she shared with us. As a Harvard and Sandra Day O'Connor was a Stanford University graduate, graduating top of her class, couldn't get a job in a law firm. They're scared of women of childbearing years. That's a reality. And to the extent that there are hundreds of women that faced that and did not complain. They didn't follow a charge of discrimination with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. Doesn't mean it didn't happen.
Yes, that's true. And even Ruth Bader Ginsburg had problems. It seems like all the people that you would think that law firms would be knocking down doors to hire them just can't get hired. And I'm also saddened because I have actually ran into people who said that because of Me Too, they are so afraid to hire women. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So back then it was, oh, you're going to have a child, so therefore we can't hire you. And now it's, oh, you're going to bring a sexual harassment charge against us. I'm saying, but if you don't do anything, you know, then you don't have to worry about that. But oh well.
Yeah, but you want to know something. If you're not doing wrong, what are you afraid of? What is the problem?
Mhm.
I mean,
Exactly.
shouldn't that be the case itself? If you, I mean, it's almost like, do we need unions? We did need unions, but if you don't have what you call the intelligence to run a company where your people are not checked by their demeanors, that's on you as an owner of a company, as management, as senior leadership. But these senior leaderships, obviously, when it comes to the legal profession, they're these sitting old white men saying no.
And getting
And
by with saying no. That's the
yeah,
problem. They're getting
exactly,
by with
exactly.
saying no.
And we're going to go to Wilbur now because he's not one of those people. But I do want to know why, Will, you got into law and why you are still in law after all these years. And after that, since Vanita joined us, I want to go to Vanita, so hopefully she'll share her experience with us. So, Will, your turn.
Okay, the short answer is I didn't know what to do with my life, so I went to law school.
Sounds like a good thing. You could have done
Okay.
worse.
And while we're at this, I think it's my father who told me within the past 20 years that half the graduates of Columbia Law School these days are females. I think my recollection is correct.
I don't even know.
Yeah,
Well,
I think you're right.
but even if that is true, I don't think it's going to matter because there's still a gatekeep and gatekeep keepers, and they don't look like they're dying anytime soon in this century.
Well, they don't have to die. They just have to expand their idea of what a lawyer is. And some people have managed to do it. And so we're hoping that the rest will be able to manage to do it as well. They talk about how this generation seems to be headed, well, some people in this generation seems to be headed the same route as the older generation. And I'm like, oh my gosh, no, I thought that we could at least get more equity with this generation, but they're saying that it might not necessarily be so.
I think there's a segment of the population that may pay attention to equity and diversity issues. However, in 2020, I want to say, I went to an Annapolis law firm that was hosting the Women's Bar Association. They were allowing the Women's Bar Association to conduct their judicial selection committee meeting there. And everybody in the entire law firm was all white. They don't, it was, they showed all of the composition of the law firm was flashed on video screen before you as you sat in the lobby. And I'm sitting up there looking at that, and they have no problem with that. So it's, and it was just in your face when you walked in the door. You saw there was no diversity, and law firm just continued to go on about their business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. That's true. Okay, well, let's see if Vanita wants to say anything. Vanita, do you want to say something?
Anita, can we see you?
I just muted, yeah.
Hello,
I actually
Vanita,
had
could you
myself,
introduce
you couldn't see me because I actually was on the phone with an attorney walking through a case that's a freaking disaster that he has to either settle or try for Zoom hearing at 9 in the morning, a contestant at 9 o'clock in the morning. So I'm, that's it. But what was the question, Marylin?
Oh, well, in honor of Women's History Month, we are highlighting women attorneys. Okay. And I thought it would be wonderful if you could tell us a bit about yourself, how you got into law, why you stay in law, and what you're doing right now.
Okay. Well, I didn't go to college thinking I was going to be a lawyer. Because where I'm from Atlantic City, New Jersey, where I grew up, the Black lawyers were in that area at the time were 4 men. That was it. There were no women back then. Attorneys. Now there are lots, but there were only 4. And I went to college thinking I was going to be a psychologist or a psychiatrist, took my first class and hated it. Psych 101. And then the next one after that I took, and I was like, oh, I don't like this. I don't like this at all. And I had a great aunt.
Oh, I'm sorry, Molly's laughing because Molly, what's your profession?
I'm a psychologist.
I know, Molly, I went to that big class. You know how the Psych 101 is like huge? And I was like, oh, I don't like this. I don't know what this is, but I'm not liking this. So I have a great aunt who's now deceased who said, well, I think, you always want to argue and fight for the underdog, no matter what. So I think you should be a lawyer. Literally, it was my great aunt said, I think you should be a lawyer.
Vanita, I don't want to take you off your course of your story, but why do people think if you can argue that's the immediate entry into lawyers? Why do people think that's what law is? It's an argument, and it's not.
You know what? I think because we're raised on television.
Okay.
And people's, back then it was Perry Mason.
Yeah.
And what was the other guy? There's Perry Mason and another guy that were the lawyers on television. Matlock, all of that. They were the people on TV. And so that's what people saw and believed what the law is. When most lawyers don't actually litigate. And
Right.
that I think would be the surprise to the general public is that people get law degrees and do so much more with a law degree than be a litigator. And that litigation is just a small part of the legal profession. I think people would be astonished and surprised that is the reality for people who get law degrees. So, but that's why I went, because I just was at a crossroads. And my aunt is the one who I love dearly said, no, this is what I think you should do. And at the time they had, I had an advisor at Cornell who, Dr. Turner and Janice Turner, who said, yeah, you sign up for the Law Society and this is what you need to do, and help me get a class to take my LSATs, and told me to apply. Actually, she's the one that told me to apply for a scholarship at NYU Law School to be a Ruth Tilden Scholar, because I didn't know how I was going to pay for law school. And so she was my mentor. I worked for her as a student. And so she is the one that helped me get, apply for this scholarship, join the Law Society. So I think that you need people along the way to tell you, to guide you what to do and how to do it. And that when you don't have that, that's when it's problematic. When you don't have someone to guide you or to tell you, yes, this is possible, you can do this, that this is a possibility for you.
Right.
Because if you don't see it, how do you know that this is a possibility for you to do and to become? And then when I went to law school, I went to NYU, and NYU had one of the largest number. The year I went, they had the largest number of women of color and largest class of women of color that they had ever had in the history of NYU. So
do you still keep in contact with some of those ladies that you ran into then?
Some of the women that I went to law school with, I really don't. Some of them I do. It's a handful of them that I remain in contact with. But a lot of them I do not, because people went and did, different stuff. And I was a little different, I will tell you, Dr. Dwyer, because I had my daughter when I was a junior in college.
Good. All right.
And so I was in law school with a kid, because I didn't take 4 years off. I graduated in 4 years, and then I went straight to law school because I did get a scholarship that paid my tuition. And it was come now or you won't, we can't guarantee this money the next year, which is a reality. And it was, for me, it has always been a reality. How are you going to pay for undergraduate? How are you going to pay for law school? And so when you get a scholarship, you're like, okay,
here it is.
Here it is. I'll be there. Thank you very much. So that's what happens. But now there are more lawyers.
How do you do that? Because I know I saw some people in my law school have children and go to law school, and I mean, it blew my mind how they were able to do that. How did you do that?
First of all, you have a great kid. And I have to say that my daughter was, I think God gives you what you need when you need it, even if you don't know you need it.
Mhm.
He gave me a child who was like, she was a little kid that if I punished her, go sit in the chair, she'd get in the chair and read a book till she fell asleep.
Wow.
She was the kind of kid, she slept all night. So she was the kind of kid that she was an easy little girl to parent. And I was a single parent at the time. So she was an easy kid to parent. And the thing is, I didn't know any better, that I didn't know I couldn't do it. And since I didn't see anybody do it before me and fail, it was, I can do this. What's the problem? You've grown up in a family where there have been single parents all along. You do what you need to do.
Let me ask you women something. And the question comes from, while in law school, you already have this as a male-dominated field. This is a type of field that, again, certain doors open up for certain people. It's political. Did you sit in law school thinking, I don't want to be political, I want to be right? Or did you knew you have to go into the political realm to fight some of these battles, even on the legal side, even though they are playing it on the political courts? Did you guys figure that out in law school? No? Liz is shaking her head no.
No, it wasn't a problem in law school at all, because I did have, like somebody suggested, I'd have had a mentor to suggest where to apply, and I got ideas from the older students in the law school who gave me guidance. But so it wasn't hard to get a job initially. It was just once I was out there in the real world. And my best friend sort of persuaded me to go to law school. She passed away, and I didn't have the same support system that I used to have, especially after my ex-husband and I divorced, because we were law partners. And,
right.
Well, so much for that.
Holly has a question.
I had a perspective. I wanted to say that, let me just throw in today, I don't know how many of you realize it, but the House just passed the Equal Rights Amendment. So, I mean, it really puts a lot into perspective. But, and we mentioned Sandra Day O'Connor, but we didn't mention that she was at the top of her law school class and couldn't get a legal job when she was through. And my perspective was the wife, a stay-at-home mother of someone in a law firm in Maryland. And they wanted to hire women. But when this is a funny thing, I never could rationalize this, and maybe you can help me. They started hiring women, and to a person, the women the women that they hired were married to male lawyers, and they were expected to take all the child care responsibility, not sharing. So I'm thinking, why would I want them to hire women when the burden was increased for the men in the firm if they hired women? Is that a conundrum? I tell you. Isn't that funny? I mean, there was just a different expectation. And I bet Will was never asked in anything, was he planning to have children? Right?
Probably not.
Right?
Probably not.
Will you
That's
ask
the
that question?
question.
And if so, what was your answer?
See, that's the question that
You're
the
on mute.
partners.
Will, you on mute? We can't hear you.
When I entered law school, I was single.
Did they ask you if you were going to have children? And if so, what was your answer?
Answer, they did not ask. While we're at this, there's another little bit of history. The class in Columbia Law School in New York, class of 1930, there were 2 women, and those were the first 2 women to graduate Columbia Law School.
Wow.
Wow.
So not so long ago.
No.
Yeah. Wow, not so long ago. Oh, but I know we have a topic today, but I'm so excited. I wonder if we could go back to Holly again, because I know Virginia was the 30th state to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment. When you said the House, I got excited and I said, wait a second, I don't understand. So if you
Oh,
could-
okay. The House last Congress passed the equal right. This is to remove the timeline, the deadline that was
Oh,
imposed
yes.
when
Okay.
it passed in 72.
Yes.
So remove, and this is so incredibly sad because you heard all the arguments against it and they were just so unbelievable. You thought this is like the people who are against it were from another world. I can't
Today they
even-
were arguing against it?
Hmm.
Wow.
Just,
2021.
again, it would open up bathrooms. I'm here
Oh
to
my
tell you.
gosh.
Open, and it would just be. They actually said these words, so I can repeat it. Just a leftist ploy to get in all these. You just couldn't believe it. But still, the numbers weren't there. So it passed. And what will happen in the Senate is up for grabs. It wasn't even taken up last Congress. But this, if this is, and you all know, it will be litigated for the rest of our lives probably. But I came up with a new, I came up with a new mantra, which is, we want it in our lifetimes. And just think of all the people. Alice Paul started when she got suffrage. She turned to the Equal Rights Amendment. And all the people who had worked on suffrage, who never saw suffrage, and she saw it, and then she realized when they the imposition of the timeline, the deadline, was an unfriendly amendment. This was to keep it from being passed, and they were right. They did it, And so anyway, that's.
I had Mrs. America keep popping up on my, I guess, recommended list on Hulu, and I kept on saying, and then finally I decided to watch it, and it was excellent. Oh my gosh. For those who haven't seen it, you should definitely see it because it talks about the ERA amendment. And one of the things that was so problematic to me was Mrs. Shipley, Phyllis Shipley.
Phyllis Schlafly, yeah, I remember.
Schlafly, thank you. Yeah, that was one of the things you kept mispronouncing her name. Yeah, Phyllis Schlafly. Schlafly, yes, 2F. And the way she talked about the Women's Rights Amendment is basically back in 72, is the way you are saying that they were talking about it today. And that's really, really sad. Yeah. And then on top of that, it shows you that women were the ones who kept us from getting the Equal Rights Amendment, because it was sailing along until she decided that she was going to make a name for herself with the by keeping the Equal Rights Amendment from being ratified by the 38 states. And it's like, oh my gosh, wow. Well, so
but Marylin, that just shows that we are not just monolithic, that women,
right.
We have a variety of opinions, a variety of ideas, a variety of thought. And that why should anyone think that we have to all think the same? That's what I got out of the movie Miss America, because she was a mess. I was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
But it really drove home that we really have a diversion of opinions and thoughts, and that people don't always appreciate that diversion. Just like they think that all Black folks, we all have the same opinions, we all think the same way, we all have the same beliefs. That's not true. There's certain core things that we believe, but it's such a variety, of what people think and what people believe, that we don't take into consideration.
How can
at all. It's the same for women lawyers. I mean, I would never have been worked in a firm. I did a little internship when I was in law school, and I was like, I got a little girl. I'm not working those hours for nobody, especially if that money's not directly coming to me. That's just not going to happen. So I didn't even think about working for a firm because I, in a a little internship, realized that they have billable hours, and they have at that time they had long hours that they expected all of their new associates to do, all of them.
Do you think do the women, collective women who are attorneys, have a strong voice unified throughout the states? Is it a unified voice?
That's what I was just asking. I can't believe they would. Do you?
In the legal profession, I think we have a semi one voice. I mean, I think the women's bar are very active and very vocal, at least in the state of Maryland. I don't know about other jurisdictions, but in the state of Maryland, the women's bar is very vocal, very active. Now, they've not always been very inclusive. Let's be honest about it. They've not been very inclusive, and have not been the most diverse group. But they have really worked to form a coalition of women attorneys.
I would agree with that wholeheartedly, that sometimes they are not inclusive. And you might as, if you've experienced, it, and you can nail it and basically say, they're not always inclusive. But yeah, they do have a coalition that's, from women's bar associations and other various similar entities.
Because I was wondering, because I know some of the Black attorneys belong to a Black bar association, and then there's the other bars. I mean,
lots of those.
Right. So how isn't that creating separatism, or is it trying to create a voice where a Black
where none exists?
Right. Okay.
I say it because you have, for example, DWAC, Greater Washington Women's Bar Associations, and some of them are affiliated with the National Bar Association, like A. Franklin Bourne and Monumental City Bar Associations. But the reason why you have all these, separate identity, just like you have the Black Police Officers Association,
right,
it's needed. They need a voice, and they've got to collectively assemble themselves in an organization where they can air their issues and their similar issues and build a coalition to advance policies in their direction.
So again,
that makes it
equitable. So here's the question: what is the Women Attorneys Association? What are they trying to advance if they're still running into these barriers that's been around for decades?
Oh, the women's bar associations are pretty active, and in fact, they have the what is it? I want to say, is it MLAW? They have a organization that puts forth legislation every year. Every year they put forth different legislation. But I mean, Marilyn and I both are past presidents of J. Franklin Bourne Bar Association, which was created in 1977, and the need for the Bar Association still exists, just like the need for the HBCU still exists. That we in America don't want to admit it, but racism is alive and well.
Well, I don't know why you say we don't want to admit it. I think we talk about it all the time. And so what is
we
there?
Talk about it all the time. But if you hear listen to some Republicans and some Democrats, that's over. Racism does not exist. We have other issues, but that doesn't exist.
And of what race are they speaking about?
They're normally not Black folks, but they are white people that believe that racism doesn't exist, slavery is over, and we'll say to a certain degree, get over it. The fact about white privilege, which exists in America, especially white male privilege, just recently became put to the forefront. about, how that privilege exists. And people don't want to acknowledge that they have the privilege, nor necessarily want to give that power over or share, because with privilege comes power.
But I think,
Well, yeah, that's so important because the whole concept of white privilege power. See that, to me, there's a mechanism for them to try to make a slavery or racism a myth. And it's a constant need for them to deflect and oh no, it doesn't exist. Oh no, they're in total denial all of the time. And part of that is to be in denial because they still want that white privilege and power to exist.
but that's why we have women attorneys. Don't you guys argue? Can't you guys argue with that? Isn't that an argument you guys can bring up or litigate against this? Because it seemed like it needs to crack from the inside. We have judge problems because it still hasn't cracked from the inside.
Well, I think that we try to do whatever we can, but it's structural. It is embedded in the system. And you have people who will actually admit that there's a problem, but to say this is what we have to do to solve the problem or to make it better. They're like, well, it's nice, but somebody else could give up their privilege. Somebody else could give up their power. After all, I'm only this one little person. So,
well, even with this whole Meghan Markle incident, or that just upset the apple cart all over again.
It sure did.
It's because you've just brought up racism again, and so it existed, and it hasn't.
Yeah.
They're fixated in making sure that you don't see it, and I'm like, what are you kidding? I see it.
Yeah, it's funny. It's plain as day. And when she mentioned it again, the royals were like, "Oh my God, don't we got rid of this during the wedding? Don't we squash this?"
No, and now the things that were, I saw deeper and more into that interview, the Oprah interview, more than others did, because I saw also an institution, however, that cut her out and cut her off and her child off. That's what I saw.
Yes.
And the fact that she mentioned that there was some family conversation about the color of the child's skin. That's totally believable. Totally believable. And so it's not unusual. And yes, it does exist today because that conversation happened in the 2020 era. That or if it wasn't 2019 or something, but it's something that happens. And when you add to that element the bad press that was in the UK at the time, that was just adding fuel to the fire. So this institution, like I said, trying to cut her off in that way, they just were feeding into the news frenzy, which demonstrates the impact of the media in perpetuating racism.
Is there a lot? I'm sure there isn't, but women law firms, few, little, non-existent, some. What do you ladies know?
Not enough.
Not enough.
But Elizabeth, you speak on it. I just say not enough.
Well, there's a few. I don't know that many that have an actual firm. Marylin probably knows better than I do. She's more actively practicing. But it's cool that it's not a solo practitioner. That's often what women have, their own offices. But to have a firm that's just women attorneys, I know a few, but very, very, very few.
So why?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking too. Sorry, the only one that I could think of is Hostetter and Heather Hostetter and whoever her partner is, but that's the only one that I could think of in all of Montgomery County.
So why haven't women got together and say, let's build this thing? Because it's not, if you guys don't build it, it doesn't get built.
Yeah, Hostetter Strength. It's the only law firm that I could think of that's women owned.
Well, there are a lot of solo practitioners that exist that are women only, and they do that for a lot of varying reasons. Sometimes they find that the best fit when they're trying to navigate motherhood to be a solo practitioner as opposed to connections with a large law firm. They have much flexibility in setting their schedule and organizing and managing, mom tasks. But I personally, before I became a judge, I was a sole practitioner. I had brought in associates at times, but I did navigate the waters of being a sole practitioner for 20 years. So it can be done, and I don't believe I'm the only person. I think there are many women lawyers who choose that option for various reasons, because it can be an opportunity for you to manage your schedule in a more flexible way.
I think that's one of the best things about the profession for women, because it allows a lot of flexibility, because there are so many things that you can do, especially nowadays with modern technology. You don't have to be in the same room with people. It allows for a lot of flexibility, and I think that works really well for women. I think, Liz, you wanted to say something?
No,
Okay, sorry.
I'm thinking I guess I prefer not to have my own practice, because I'd like to do what the doctor suggested, linking up with other, be in a practice, but.
And I also said, when you have your own practice, it's more than 3 jobs, because you have to do you have to be the marketer, which means that you have to go somehow get the client. Then you have to be the lawyer, where you actually do the legal stuff. And then you have to be the bill collector, where you actually, collect the bills. And it is a lot for one person, or even if you have somebody helping you with the bill collecting and things of that sort, it's a lot. So I can see why many people don't want to do that.
So when you ladies talk to your male counterparts and you discuss these problems that you have had as women, Black women, just problems, what's the verbiage you get in response to the things you have said? Is it acknowledgement? Is it brushed off? Is it understood? But like Marylin says, I'm not going to do anything about it, but I see where you're coming from. Is that what you get?
I think there's a whole range. I hear things like, "Oh, I might be wearing rose-colored glasses, but I don't see a problem." I was like, "Whoa!"
Okay.
And then you have some other people who are basically saying, "Yeah, there's a problem, but I'm not the cause of it, so I can't fix it."
Brushed off. That's the bottom line. I think that's the biggest response.
I think that, as I recall, I had a gentleman work with me in my law firm, and I would run certain issues by him, and I often did that to get the male perspective, and oftentimes they gave me insight into what I was missing, and showed me how the game is played, and I had to take on that lens and that understanding. Otherwise, I was confused. I wasn't sure what game was being played.
Wow. I mean, to know that you have to not just understand what your legal profession is, but understanding now what game is actually being played. It just seems so. It sounds absurd, but the reality is so huge and heavy. And yet,
it is. It goes as deep as negotiating a settlement for your client, and determining when a case is going to be settled. Are they going to take you to trial? Are they going to, try to, but the tactics were, hand delivering a motion for summary judgment that's 100 pages long, on the eve that it's due, which limits or shortens time. So you have to ask for an extension of time and so on and so forth. Playing games at the settlement table, that type of thing. So I had to learn, like I said, the game is being played.
Does anyone else want to share a story before we take off here? And I just want to say thank you, all you ladies, and tell all your friends and partners and future law partners, Eliz, that you're gonna link up with, because there's all these pockets of battles going on, right? We have emotional pockets, we have spiritual pockets, we have legal pockets, we have systematic education pockets, we have all these financial pockets, and we definitely have to move the level together because they feed off each other. I mean, it just one just can't rise up and the other one stays stagnant, because it does if we don't push these, and I don't even want to call them agendas anymore. They're not agendas because they just need to happen. It's not an agenda where it seems like someone only gets something out of it and that's it. Should be the progression of humanity as a social system, not just an agenda. And it's crazy to think that there are these mindsets that only looks at it as you're complaining, as your pain, as an agenda. And
Well, I appreciate you for saying that, Dr. Dyer, in so many ways, because some people ask me, why apply for a judgeship if you know you're going to be turned down? And see, my attitude is very different. I am a citizen of this country. And not only am I a citizen, I passed the bar just like you did. And to the extent that the Constitution defines the eligibility requirements for a judge, and they are a public servant, you are on the taxpayer's dime, and not only are you on the taxpayer's dime, but you also are a taxpayer. You have a right to apply for the position and be seriously considered in a fair and impartial manner. And anybody who is going up against that system, tearing people down for doing what they have a constitutional right to do, they're wrong. So thank you for saying that, Dr.
you're
Dyer.
welcome. You're welcome.
And I don't understand the idea that competition is such a bad thing, because it's like, if you're the best, then fine, you're the best, and everybody's going to see it and you're going to win. But to say that there should be no competition because my friends have chosen me, so therefore that's
your friends have chosen you, exactly
that,
right. That system needs to be torn down.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that was most of the testimony that took place during when legislation was proposed to change the current system in Maryland, from that people could run for a judgeship, that they would be just you would be on the ballot and it would be yes, a thumbs up or a thumbs down. No one would be able to put their name in. That was part of the testimony part of the questions, interesting, from our delegates was it seems like the problem is not the electoral process. It seems like the problem is the judicial selections process. And that was a comment that was made by several of the delegates, is what I heard. And, let's be honest, favoritism, nepotism, because it's no coincidence that children of judges become judges.
That's right.
That is not coincidental.
That's right.
Oh, which reminds me,
just
did you
not
hear the news
coincidental
about Kavanaugh?
All.
Yeah, because
but that's the thing, is that not the legal profession is not willing to acknowledge it. And that therein is the problem, and therein is the rub, that they're not ready to acknowledge it.
And when it comes to the surface, they try to bury it as quickly as they can, which is why I then go into Kavanaugh, because we know that Kavanaugh is the son of a Montgomery County Circuit Court judge. And he was in the news, was it yesterday or today? Because they said that he had all this debt. And as soon as he was nominated, the debt gone. So I'm like, wait a second,
Yeah, I
You
mean,
have a Supreme Court justice whose debt just disappeared, and
you talking about Lucky Charms.
yeah.
That's a cereal he's eating. If that's a Lucky Charm cereal he's got to eat, show me. I need that cereal, right?
But was his father a lawyer? Was his father? Because Andy Sonner talked about hiring his mother. She was someone who went late to law school. Did you all know that? So I can't remember. He was
Yes,
an
his
only
mother
child.
was a prominent lawyer. And back in the day, Holly, we used to call, his mother was in a group of women, and it's a dating myself. We used to call them the Mercedes ladies. And they all drove Mercedes, and they all traveled in the same circles. And I don't think her husband was a lawyer, though. I think she was. I don't think he was. But
I agree.
he was. Judge Kavanaugh was raised in Chevy Chase.
Right.
So
At the country club.
and he attended a boys' school where they did not do drinking. They didn't drink.
Right.
And I mean, that's why I said, some of this is funny because I watched the whole his his hearing, and I was like, what boys' school did he go to? Where? They never partied. They never drank.
Georgetown Prep, which is the same place that Neil Gorsuch went as well. 2 people on the Supreme Court came from there.
Well, and you think about it, they didn't have parties where they drank and did any of that stuff. That didn't happen.
No.
Well,
Just choir boys.
And I just want to tell you one story. What happened was my husband, my kids are in their 40s, but he took them to his office every Saturday. They loved to go to his office with him. He loved to work long hours. He could take him and everything. And you cannot believe the pressure there was not to bring his children to the office. And his answer was, I'm the senior partner. I can do it. So, I mean, there's a lot to say about that. And I think I'm in this group because he's long gone. I'm sorry to say he died about 23 years ago, but he also would complain about the judges bitterly. And I didn't think our car was going to have a driver's because he hit the driver's wheel and everything. And I spoke to someone about it, someone in one of my representatives, and they said, oh, we have very good judges. And I'd say, well, what about this? Well, that's an exception, but we have very good. And I didn't even know. So I just wanted to share that. It's weird.
Actually, Holly, I think a lot of people here would know who your husband was.
Yeah, he was in, I think it was the largest law firm in Prince George's County. It was Joseph Green Walden Lane. And I always say, I'm the Joseph in the Joseph Green Walden Lane.
And your daughter is a lawyer.
She's a public defender.
Yeah, in Montgomery County. So I'm pretty sure.
And she grew up in a law
I'm pretty sure you know her, Bonita.
Pardon?
She does.
You're on mute. Yeah, because Bonita.
I said, yes, I do.
Yeah.
Hey, Bonita.
So we have a new legal attorney here on the air. What's your name, dear?
Augusta Cerebor. Yes.
How you doing?
So do we have a couple of minutes?
We do.
For Augusta to, okay, great. Augusta, we've been speaking and we have been discussing, how we got into law, why we got into law. Do you want to quickly tell us a little bit about yourself?
Oh, okay. And I do apologize. I had a month for 7, so I was so proud of myself. I didn't realize it was at 6. So I had practiced nursing for years, but I always ended up advocating for people, so I felt like maybe I should get the legal backing to keep advocating. And so that's how I ended up here. I've always advocated for people. I mean, we're talking years.
Well, I'm glad you're going to be an advocate for people. And I'm going to say this before we take off and thank everyone for coming on You Be the Judge. And remember, you can always catch this on any podcast station you listen to and catch the links of You Be the Judge or Bridges Presents You Be the Judge. if we don't clear up the courts and all of its racism, separatism, egotism, we're going to have so much more blood in the streets, and that is not a scare tactic, but it is just a fact promise. Because the only way we can heal this legally is in the courts, and when it's so unjust, then the frustration finds its way in the streets and explodes to innocent people getting killed, a lot of people getting damaged, and a lot of hurt people. And that has a lot to do with our court system. We don't really focus so much on our executive branch as much, but our legislative branch and our legal system, if that's our own, that's where we can have equality. And if we don't see equality from anyone from educated to wherever they are, as a conscious being, they have no other resource but to take it upon themselves, and that turns into vigilante, that turns into revenge, and that's blood. Those words just mean blood, and we have to do better, because if we don't, we're going to lose a lot of our kids. This is the war we're in. The war is not across the other countries for other reasons. The war is in our courts, and we have to balance this out.
Well, let me just briefly mention that my concern with that issue of working it out with the court system, there has got to be major changes that deal with the root of the problem. If we supported employment for everybody in the communities, some of these crime issues would fade away. And if you also practice community policing so that there is an even, not an uneven application of the law, there would again be significant changes for the better.
So I hope we can do better. We are doing better by talking about it, by mentioning about it. And I know everyone is doing the best they can. So let's just keep working together, because together the work is lighter. Marylin, anything?
Yes, I definitely agree. And I just want to thank everybody so much for being here. We really appreciated your presence. We hope that you enjoyed the conversation, and we hope that you will join us next week in another enlightening conversation.
Next week, we're going to be having a person on who did serve some time, and we want to talk about some legal issues that he comes across with. So we're going to have him on to actually talk about the legal understanding of what he went through in prison and out of prison. So thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, you're muted, Molly.
Oh, Molly.
Molly.
Okay, tomorrow, the Women's Democratic Club of Montgomery County is having an important event, which is open to the public. And Marylin, can you forward the info to everybody here?
Yes, I can.
I only have a couple of your emails, but